Hello. Welcome to another episode of Ancient Office Hours by the Ozymandias Project. Trireme Transit is now boarding for all new and returning passengers. Now departing, present ponderings. Next stop is Ancient Office Hours at a library lost in the sands of time.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 96 of Ancient Office Hours. This week, I am joined by the wonderful and lovely Melissanthi Mahut, the voice of Cassandra in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Melissanthi is a Greek-Canadian actress. She is known for playing Cassandra in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Calliope in The Sandman, and Mita Xenakis in Eurovision Song Contest, The Story of Fire Saga. In this episode, Melissanthi talked about her favorite myths and stories from growing up in Greece, her acting preferences between history and mythology, her experience playing Cassandra in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and assessing the impact of the game in academia. I hope you enjoy this episode, and if you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and review us on Apple or Spotify. Yeah, man. All right. I want to jump into this. I'm super excited. And hopefully this is like a really easy softball first question for you. But I'm really curious, like, what kind of childhood sort of stories did you grow up with that you really liked?
Wow. Okay. I gotta say, I was very lucky in that I was a very, very demanding child and would not let people alone unless they read me a bedtime story. So I refuse to sleep unless you read me 20 pages, whatever it takes, until I fall asleep. No, but all jokes aside, when I was read stuff, it was Lord of the Rings, Hobbit, Narnia. So those were my stories growing up. When I could read things, when it got to the point when I could read things, some of the first books that I was given were simplified, I think, myths. So there was a lot of Greek mythology. That was what was available. You had sort of nice little pictures drawn, or yeah, I don't know if it was a thing for most Greek kids. I think it kind of must be. So there was a lot of that. I mean, the content is never ending, right? I mean, you just have endless amount of stories to go through there. That was the stuff that I started reading. And then endless things. I mean, I'm more of a fantasy kid, so that will always be the world that I will gravitate towards. Give me a book and I can be in a book forever. I will just lose myself in a book. It got to the point when we were at either the dinner table or lunch or breakfast or whatever, and I would just have this massive book in front of me blocking everyone else from my view. It's just in front of my cereal bowl and just big book open. It's like, I do not care to engage with any of you. I'm in the world. I'm in my story. Do not get me out of this world. Yeah, I'd say that those are my stories. So there's a lot of Greek mythology in there, though, at the beginning, like a lot.
I was going to say, you were raised in Greece, right? So I've got to imagine that there's going to be a lot of history, mythology type of stuff.
There was loads. I mean, you do get taught a lot of it in school, and you do start with Iliad and Odyssey and that at some point down the line. But yeah, you have Aesop's fables, and then you have how gods were created. You have Hercules, you have, all that stuff. And it's never ending, right? Because there are about 2 or 3 versions of each story as well. And so many characters. It's like the best franchise I think you can get into as a kid.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, most kids I know love that kind of stuff. Or maybe we were all just weird. I don't know. But did you have a favorite, specifically ancient Greek myth, character, story, something?
I went through phases, and I know this is my favorite god, or no, now this is my favorite god. Oh, like when I started like being very outdoorsy, I was like, no, I like Artemis now. Or when I started swimming, I was like, no, it's Poseidon, or all that kind of stuff. So that changed from year to year. But I'd say I think Labors of Hercules, and I think I was always fascinated by what could they have been inspired by to write this or to come up with this. So, and obviously because he has to go to various locations, and the locations are existing locations, there are real locations. I was always fascinated in doing some research and trying to find out, like, was there something in that area? Now, what does that signify? What did it symbolize? So it was like solving a little riddle. So in a way, I think that was the one that fascinated me the most then, because it gave me the opportunity to play detective.
Yeah, no, that's really fun. That's really cool. It always starts somewhere and then you're like, oh, I want to go deeper with this. And you're like, all right, let me just keep going until you fall down like the tangent hole. So
Yeah, right. Totally.
it's okay. I was a myth kid too. So that happened a lot. And then, my parents they're not into like high fantasy anything. So they were always just like, what now? What are you doing? Why? And I was like, don't ask. It was fun. So it's really cool. Obviously, I kind of would assume, growing up in Greece, they would kind of teach you about like Greek myths and stuff. But, it like as part of that, and I keep getting like split answers. So I guess I'll just add this to the long list of different answers. But did you have to take ancient Greek in school?
Yes. I mean, the system changes quite a lot, which is probably why you get a lot of mixed replies, because the educational system in Greece changes, especially when it's the 3 final years of high school and what it takes to actually get you into a university, what exams you need to sit, and therefore what courses you need to take to determine what exams you will sit, et cetera, et cetera. But I think up until, I think for the first 3 years of junior high is compulsory. And then the last 3, you can opt out. So if you choose to go down the path of, the sciences, do math, physics, chemistry, that kind of stuff, then you don't have to do it. Whereas I went down the other path. So I went history, ancient Greek, Latin, literature, et cetera, et cetera. So I did quite a lot of it. A lot of ancient Greek.
That's so cool, though. I mean, honestly, seriously, don't. It's just interesting because I'm so used to people either giving me the like, okay, well, I took Latin in high school and then I did ancient Greek in college, and then it's like I only took it because I wanted to go and like be a professional classicist or something. So, oh, that's fascinating. Because I'm like, okay, so you took it because you obviously enjoyed it, but like at that point when you were taking it, did you know kind of what you wanted to do as a career, or were you like, let me just take it because it's fun and then we'll see where it goes?
Absolutely no idea. No, it was just shot in the dark. It was a complete shot in the dark. It was really difficult because I did like the sciences as well. So I did really like physics. I did really like math. I did really like biology, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of difficult to choose. And they kind of tell you, well, you get to choose one of the two. You can't have both, and you can't ever turn back. So it makes it feel, oh my God, like I really need to know. I really have to have decided by this point. So it's a lot of pressure. At least I felt that it was a lot of pressure. And what did I do with this immense amount of pressure? I just kind of went, I'm just going to go this way, because it was a 50-50 at that point. I decided to go down the other path. And no, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. I just knew that I was particularly drawn to literature. I loved history, and languages were easy for me. So in a way, it was kind of the easier path to take. But I didn't know what that would eventually lead to. Were I to go back and change, would I? I have no idea. I mean, growing up, I have said, I wish I could have been a bit better at this, or I would have loved to do forensic anthropology or something like that, which would have required me to go down a different path. I still really love biology and anything that has to do with the human body and study of neuroscience, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't really know that I would have done anything different. I kind of do think in a like really corny way that I would have ended up doing what I'm doing anyway, somehow down the line, no matter what path I would have chosen to get there. I do think that I would have ended up doing the same thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. It's interesting because I was like doing some research, reading up, and I was like, because you got into acting a bit later, right?
I got into acting almost actually straight out of high school, as in I applied to a university in Greece. So the way that it works is you sit your exams and then you don't know your results. And then you get given this list of universities, and each university has a certain amount of points that you need to have gathered in order to get in. So the points are the marks. The marks is what you get from the total marks of all your tests, but you don't know what those are when you're choosing the universities. So I say, for example, I think I've hit like 17,000. Got that. And I look at my university list and I can say, well, this, and this, and this are my first 5 choices. And depending on what my actual results are, then I will either not get into the first 2 and then I'll get it, But it's very bizarre because you don't have all the data at the time. So I was like, not only did I not know what I wanted to do, I also was looking at this list of universities. I had no idea. So it was like, for me, it was like filling out the lottery. I just did it. I was like, like 1, 2, like random 3, 4, 5. I ended up doing really well, but it was mainly because I just placed a bet with myself as to, let's just see how far we can go or how high we can aim. And then I ended up being able to get into whichever university I wanted. But at that point, I was like, okay, now that that's out of the way, let's actually figure out what it is that we want to do. So the stress was removed from the decision. So it's like, now I know that I can do this. Now let's actually sit and figure out. And it was during that summer, I think I was about 17 going on 18, that it hit me. I think this is what I want to do. And I didn't really know how to approach it. I said, right, okay, Googled what to do for acting. And I just like, it's the dumbest thing. I think it was very much like that though. So I Googled how to become an actor. I said, go to drama school. I said, okay, sounds like a wise decision. I Googled drama schools. I found maybe 3 or 4 in Greece, found out what I needed to do, prepared a couple of monologues, went for it and got in. So that was in Athens. Then I did the same thing 2 years later because I didn't think that was enough education, little overachiever. And then I did the same thing again for the UK.
Oh man, that's awesome. I don't know many people who'd be like, let me go to school for this. And then let me go to school for the exact same thing somewhere else.
I'm such a nerd. I embrace it though. I love it.
Is it nerdiness or is it just like dedication? I don't know.
I mean, where do you draw the line?
I mean, it's okay because I'm asking myself because that's what all my friends and I did, right? We're like the weird people who are like, I love school so much. Let me keep going to school and let me go to school again.
I can completely relate to that. If I could go back to school again and do something else now, like, where do I sign? I'll do it.
Oh man. Yes. I know. Because I routinely have this conversation where I'm like, Mom, Dad, I want to go back to school. And they're like, no, we will not let you enter school for another 8 years. Like, no, don't do it. You'll come out and you'll be like 40. And I was like, yeah, that's maybe a bad idea. It's fine, but I get the urge, right? I was like, can I just be a career student? Like, that sounds like the best job in the world.
It is.
So it was really funny. I probably should not admit this, but I will anyway. But I remember I was like trying to find a way to scam the system where I wouldn't have to ever pay for my schooling. I like asked around and I was like, say one wanted to do like 10 PhDs and spend 10 years in each, but they were all fully funded. And if you just die at the end of that, do you have to pay all that money back? Or can I just like never pay it back because I have like 10 PhDs?
And?
and I never got an answer.
I was really hoping you had one. It's like someone actually offered some genuine advice when it comes to it. So, well, okay, this is what you do.
I really wish someone actually had an answer, but the problem is no one's ever done that. So I don't think, unless someone wants to be first, I don't have enough subjects I'm passionate about to do 10 PhDs, so it probably won't be me.
That is also fair.
Or, I could enter all these programs and then like slowly learn that I'll fail them out, but also fully funded. So I'll be like, oh, well, I guess it's 4 years that I leave now, but I learned and I didn't pay. Not a great tenable way to live life. But yes, that was a scheme I had a couple years ago. Didn't go anywhere. But okay, I'm really curious, since you did 2 different drama schools, one in Greece, one in the UK. I'm curious, like, was the experience in them pretty similar? Did you do a lot of the same things? Were they different?
I'd say they were very different. Obviously, that is partly due to the fact that at that age, from 17 to 18, then from 18 to 19, the 1 year, in terms of how you mature and grow, it kind of feels like 3 or 4 or 5 years looking back on it. It's very condensed knowledge and experience that you kind of give. It feels like a lot more than it is. So I think that it's partially due to that, but also I do feel that they were very different experiences. it has changed the system now. So I want to make it clear that I'm referring to the system that I was introduced to when I was in Greece. So it felt very much like throwing you in the deep end and letting you figure out how to swim. So that was the training method, which at the time I don't think I appreciated as much, but eventually I think ended up being the most valuable lesson looking back on it. It was like the harsh way of learning, but now I kind of say, you know what? I think that was what gave me the solid foundation. Obviously, apart from the curriculum, which was very different because we had different classics. In the UK, we did a lot of Shakespeare. In Greece, we did obviously a lot of ancient Greek tragedy, which was the skeleton, I'd say, or like the base of the program, the 3-year program. Everything that we built on was ancient Greek tragedy in the one school and Shakespeare in the other one. Now, UK was very targeted to work. And I mean work as a professional. So they prep you very well for the outside world, if that makes sense. So it's not only art for art's sake, but it's also art for a profession. So there's a lot of preparation as how to behave in interviews, how to behave in auditions, and a lot of the PR aspect of it, which, to be fair, is definitely not my strong suit, but extremely educational as well. Different disciplines and very different demands. I'd say diametrically opposite approaches, but equally effective. The combo, I think, was a very good combo to have. I mean, I can't say, oh, I think I preferred this now down the line. I think that I can't imagine what other path I would have gone down, but this provided a very fair and well-balanced mix of things.
It's interesting that you mentioned that their kind of bread and butter are two very different sort of theoretical or skeletal bases. I guess I would say, like, it doesn't surprise me. And that's kind of what I might have guessed if I was asked. But I wonder, does that lend to the curriculum as well? So, like, you know, like in Greece, do you feel like you were able to, because of the sort of emphasis on Greek tragedy and the history, like, were you able to sort of take like history of the art and the theater courses versus like a sort of more, let's get into the nitty gritty history of like acting as a profession? Like, was there a difference? Was there not a difference?
If I understand the question correctly, I think especially in Greece, because so far as we know, it is the birthplace of theater, I think that a lot of the curriculum orbits around exploring how that came to be. So there's a lot of history embedded in that curriculum and how the chorus started and what tragedies meant and what comedy meant and what farce is and what was the purpose of these things. So it was more integrated into society and it was part of a way of life more than just an art form. It's definitely embedded in the curriculum in that sense. And I think more so than the courses that I took whilst in the UK. That was very different. That was also orbiting around theater, but again, it's quite a different approach. Yeah, I mean, I hadn't really thought about it that way, but it does seem that studying ancient Greek tragedy and doing ancient Greek tragedy is very much a historical thing rather than just, oh, let's see how we're going to play a tragedy, how we're going to play a comedy, you know, or just learning the lines of each. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way, really. Thank you. I traveled to a place I hadn't been before.
You're welcome. I, spend a lot of time thinking about these things, which is very interesting. But okay, I'm doing a very good job, I think, internally, because I've been like, yes, we're gonna get to Assassin's Creed Odyssey. It's favorite game. I was like, we're gonna get there. But I was like, oh no, I'm holding myself back. Just on a personal side for you, I'm curious, do you prefer roles that are based on history, like historical figures and time periods, or more mythology?
Interesting. Does it have to be an existing person? Yes, obviously, a historical figure. So it's not just, the reason I'm asking is because I do appreciate studying existing historical periods because I like the diving into the past and trying to figure out, how they dressed, what they ate, customs, what the weather was like, which affects everything. It affects the story in so many different ways. But having to play an existing historical figure is challenging. It's interesting as a practice and as an exercise. I think the best way of putting it is that, but can be very limiting, obviously, because it is, in fact, an imitation game. You need to be true to the character and true to the actual person. Whereas if it's a fantasy or a mythology, then you can obviously let your imagination run wild. And of course, you need to know and study the rules and the laws of the world, but that is your only limitation.
Makes a ton of sense, which is why I'm curious to know, for all of the stuff you've done in your acting career, do you have a favorite historical or mythological role that you've done? And any particular reason why it may or may not be your favorite?
Oh my, okay. I find it very hard to pick because every single part has a different story, and getting to that character and understanding that character has its own story. And I find value in every single one of them. But I think the one that excited me the most potentially when I got the part was for Calliope for Neil Gaiman. Obviously, because, hello, Neil Gaiman, and also because it was that particular figure. So that was my nerdy and geeking out moments, 100%. But I think that this is a very predictable response, I think, though, because Sandra has been the character that I've been with the most, and it's the character that I've also learned through the most and evolved through the most and connected with other people through the most. So in a way, I think Cassandra, no matter what I do later on in other projects, films, maybe, or games, because it was the first of that magnitude and that reach and that stretch on my part in terms of acting and exercise on my part in terms of acting, that will be always number one.
Very fair. It's not too much of a stretch to say, as a historian, we love her too. And yes, I speak for all historians. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so this one, personally, would you say, are you more a fan of Greek tragedy or comedy? And I'm going to link that with what is your favorite possible ending for Assassin's Creed Odyssey? The tragic one where everyone's dead, or the nice one?
Yes, of course. I am a sucker for ancient Greek tragedy. The worse, the better. In a way, when everything crumbles, I'm happy. Only slightly joking. I find something extremely fascinating about ancient Greek tragedy because the structure of it is so freaking well done. The storytelling and how the story unravels and how you begin to realize exactly what it is that the tragic hero has done alongside them, or just maybe one step ahead of them, but just barely ahead of them, is, I don't know, I find it fascinating. And it never ceases to amaze me how well written they are. When I first started reading tragedies, I was, I think, maybe 16 or 17. I think it was in order to find a monologue to so that I could apply to drama school. When you're reading something, but you get the feeling that this is something incredible and very important, but you're still quite young, so you can't really decode the why, but it moves you. You don't know why yet. Then you go back to it maybe 5 years later, 6 years later, you read the same thing, and then you go, oh, okay, now I have an extra 6 years experience as the first time I read this. This resonates with me differently. It hits another chord. Then you go back 6 years after that, then it's the same chord as before plus four more. It just keeps growing. It never gets old. Which is probably why we call it classic. Of course, I'm going to choose the horrible ending. Of course, I'm going to choose the ending where everyone dies. There's anger. Yeah, okay. There's anger everywhere. It's like, yes.
I mean, I know it's a choose your own path game. There is a certain beauty in how, if you go for the tragic ending where your family is all dead, it does sort of provide almost a better explanation of like the motivation. If that's the storyline you complete first, which most people I feel like it is, because that's just the main one, then you're like, oh, now I have to hunt down and do the cultist line. And then on top of it, I got to do Atlantis, unless you did them first. But like, it seems like it'd be more fuel to the fire if your family's dead and you're like, oh man, now I'm pissed. Now I'm just gonna go around and like wreck the rest of the Greek world because I'm pissed. If you have your family together, then you're like, well, it turns into like a sort of happy family romp around, and then you're like, well, why am I going around mad again?
It's like, but I'm happy. I'm settled. I have no angst. I have nothing to motivate me. No, absolutely.
Right, and then you're like, well, I got my house back, so why don't I just like stay in my house in Sparta and like be happy? It's fine. We find reasons. That's fascinating, which obviously is going to lead me to ask you. So, what was your favorite tragedy of all the great tragedies?
Oh God, you know what? It changes. I can't pick. I love the Bacchae. I love the Bacchae. It was Rex. Agamemnon, again for a different reason. Antigone, possibly my favorite. And I think the only reason I'm going to say this is because the translation I read was possibly the best I have ever read was Medea.
Ooh, yeah, a good translation of Medea. Ooh, that's hard to beat.
I still think of it. I just there's I don't know, when you get a good translation where they don't go overboard with the words and they find just the perfect word to describe it, and you go, yeah, yes, I would not move or change a single nothing. It's perfect. Just leave it as it is. It's great.
Oh man. Oh yeah. It's a great feeling. I remember day one of my ancient Greek course in college. My professor was just like, "You're going to learn to read some stuff." And he was like, "I want you to know one thing. If you only retain one thing about ancient Greek," he's like, it's so clear and they're so intentional about their wording that it's like putting on glasses you didn't know you need.
Hmm.
So he was like, as it unlocks in your brain, he was like, "Watch, you're something gonna be like, I can't. No, there's no other way. It has to be this way. The wording is perfect." And I want to say he was kind of right. I mean, it was kind of great. I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And they don't need as many words as you do in English. It's just the one word, and it has all these connotations, and it means
Yeah.
exactly what you want it and need it to, and it was perfect. So
Yeah, because I think that this is one of the reasons I love it. And I think I deeply appreciate the fact that modern Greek has retained that ability as a language, not obviously as much as ancient Greek, but I'm sure there's an official terminology for what I'm about to say. But the fact that as a language, it's broken up into bits that you can then move around and create a different word using different bits that each one individually means something different, but when you shuffle them and move them around, you can create potentially even new words, and the meaning will be very clear.
yeah, I mean, I'm not a linguist, so don't know the actual term. All I know is that studying ancient Greek and then coming and living in Greece for like 2 years of my life for sure changed how I approach language, because I would just realize like the etymology was everywhere. I was like, man, there's Greek in everything that I see, that I do. It's so cool. Yeah. I want to take modern Greek again. It's okay. It's like it's a life goal. I'm like, look, if there's one thing I'm going to do in my life, it's I'm going to learn how to actually speak modern Greek. I want to be fluent in it. So that's going to take many years, but I will learn.
I think it's just obviously like anything else. I mean, how's your ancient Greek?
Very rusty and needs practice, but
I think if it's there, or if it was once there, I think just repeating and going back and just maybe staying in the country for a month or 2 months, the brain has a brilliant way of just putting everything back together. It just does its own thing. It's great that way. I have faith in you.
I was like, yeah, if I could find a way to come back like every summer, man, for a month and just work on that Greek, I think it would really help. But, may I be that lucky and find something that will bring me to Greece every summer. Man, that would be fun. Anyway, we're about to get deep in the weeds with some AC
Go.
Odyssey stuff
Let's go.
because love. Okay, so Cassandra, we know her, we love her, she's awesome. But when you were creating her, or helping bring her to life, I should say, since you didn't write her, did you try to look to any historical or mythological figures to help shape how you were going to bring her to life? Or were you like, nope, this is just separate entity?
I'm gonna honestly try and remember if there was a reference that I had in mind. Off the top of my head, I can't honestly say that I remember having one. I think it's safe to say that she was pieced together from elements that were existing, so elements within the story, descriptions, the character that was already semi-formed, I guess, in the minds of its creators. And then the additional add-ons, I guess, I think came from either parts of my own character or parts of people that I admired, I'd say. So it's like a collage things. But no, I honestly don't think that there was a specific mythological inspiration.
Okay. Yeah. That's cool to know just because sometimes, when I'm going along, I'm like, man, this chick's Xena.
Fair,
She's Xena, right?
fair. That series was massive in Greece, by the way.
Was it?
Oh
Oh,
my
I
God.
bet.
It's like a cult classic.
Oh, I
I
love
even
that.
remember the opening music. Dun,
Do
dun,
you?
dun, 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 dun. There's Gabrielle. Oh God. Wow. Memory lane. Okay, let's get out of there.
Yeah, honestly. So I was like, yeah, I'm like, she's either Xena, but honestly, there's a lot of like Buffy undertones in there too. So I was like, oh, she's like
Ah,
Buffy.
interesting.
Yeah. When I initially played, I was like, I didn't get any Buffy, but this is what happens when you suddenly discover that you have over 1,500 hours in that
Oh
game.
wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's embarrassing. My mom would be so pissed. She'd be like, "You spent how much in a video game?" And I'd be like, I know. It's very shameful. I'm sorry, mother."
Good on you. I mean, okay. That is an investment.
Yes, yeah. Luckily, I can say I don't do it all just for fun. Like I do a lot of actual professional work with the game. So I get to brand some of it as professional time.
Absolutely.
It's still a lot. It's still a lot. But obviously, I know the game very well at this point and I have a bunch of favorite.
Probably a lot better than I do at this point.
Probably just because I spent so much of my time in it. But from what you do remember working on, I was like, did you have a favorite main quest or side quest or storyline that that was either just sort of written for the game that was fun or one that, because there are a few that are based off of mythology in there as well.
I struggled to single out things. Because of that this is kind of partly though the way my brain works is partly to blame for this, but my brain tends to single out events that stand out because of something that may have happened in the room while recording. So that is, I was in the studio almost every day for a year. So that's a lot of days in the same exact booth in the same exact location with the same people. So after a while, it kind of things started to blend into one big blob. I remember moments where anything that had Alcibiades, I remember very distinctly because the actor who voiced him, Tyrone, did such a phenomenal job with his character that I found it impossible to not laugh. It was one of those where I just started to record and I was like, guys, no, sorry, I just can't do it. I need 5. I need to go. So it's everything that this crazy, crazy individual recorded was just gold. I also remember because a lot of the time I had to follow Michael. So Michael had recorded, there was this thing that we had to do where we had to match each other for time, essentially. So, I mean, you could go like maybe 1 or 2 seconds over or like faster, or a bit slower, but we had to more often than not match each other. And there were just these moments where these names and some of these names with the accent, it just does not work. And also some of the words with the Greek accent, it just does not work. If you try to say the word world, it comes out something like world. And then I'd hear Michael trying to say things like swordfish. And it came out so wrong. To answer your question, basically, without like doing a full soliloquy here, is no, there's not specific quests, but there's specific moments and specific lines that I remember that stand out very strongly in my mind. And obviously all the cinematic bits. So everything that we did. So when we met the cult for the first time, obviously father for the first time on the cliff, kill or not kill, those moments stand out very much. I think possibly in the DLCs, I'm going to say the moments with our son, I think also stand out, but that for different reasons. I thought that was a brave decision to go down that path, or an interesting decision anyway, to go down that path. So that kind of stands out in my memory quite a bit. I don't have like one massive quest that I can think of off the top of my head. It's more like bits and pieces here and there of characters and lines.
For sure. I mean, you got probably like 1,000 pages. So I'm sure it's like too big to actually remember. And it's different, obviously, when you play it. Loving history and mythology, obviously, there's, of course, the little take on the Oedipus story, which I always appreciated.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
there's the Iliad one.
I mean, and also part of the problem was that we never really recorded in sequence. So we might have done a quest. We might have done like maybe a paragraph from one quest on a Monday and then gone back to finish the same quest on the Friday of next week. So by the time that I'd gone back, I'd forgotten what quest this is. So I was like, guys, please remind me, where are we in the world now? And everyone was just like, honestly, Mel, I don't know. We lost it after a point. I mean, there was a lot of information, and it's a shame. The majority of my memories are memories that I'm now remembering that I have because I go back and I watch stuff on YouTube. So because I go, oh, so that's what happened with that one. Okay, that's what that was. All right. Okay, that makes sense now. I kind of remembered that bit. Yeah.
I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like, no one ever shoots in sequence. It's a lot of material. You barely had time to like prep for this, I can imagine. I'm sure you probably like read the thing and were like, okay, we gotta go get this done.
No time to prep. No time to prep.
Oh,
Majority of it.
okay.
No, yeah.
Oh, great.
No, that was like, so this is like, these are your 500 pages for the week. Okay. All right, sure, yeah, why not?
Love that, right? Like, oh man, no prep
I
time. Let's
was
go.
very lucky, I think, because of the how much mythology is in it, and I know these stories, right? So in a way, I was very, very lucky because I knew the world. I knew the setup, right? I knew who this character was. I knew the feel of it, and I was trying to say, okay, so this is where we go. Oh, right, I know. I even visually, potentially, some of these locations, I know exactly what that looks like, and that really helps.
Okay, that's really helpful. Luckily, you had some kind of touchstone.
Yeah.
You mentioned the DLC, so I'm curious, did you have a favorite DLC? And we don't have to say the broad, you can say individual chapter, but they're very different. One's like rooted in literal history, and the other one is completely mythology.
I don't know. There was something about Atlantis because it was so different, I think, that I enjoyed very much. I was like, oh, okay, this is where we're going with this. All right. It's the only reason I'm going to single that one out, though. I think there were elements of everything that I enjoyed across the DLCs. What's yours?
Oh, that's hard. So I think I would have said probably the more myth stuff with Atlantis, but at the same time, I came back from Greece and immediately got this job out here at UCLA, where now I'm working for a research center on everything ancient Persia. And so the more I work here, the more I learn about like Darius and stuff. And so I'm like, actually, I feel like now I'm trending more toward I like the First Blade stuff because it brings in the Persians.
I feel that
Yeah,
they could have expanded on that a little bit more. I feel we were
they
cheated out
could
of
have.
Darius's stuff. Yeah.
I know. I was like, no, I want to know more. Like, they had a lot of room to do more with it.
They could have done so much more, and because it's the First Blade, and because I mean, yes, I get it, great, this is their connection, well done, but it's just like, okay, and give us more. But I guess that would have to mean that you'd have to go into that whole world, and that would be a different game in and of itself, and maybe they're kind of trying to go down that route anyway, or they're kind of saving it for a thing, or they wanted to test it, see, do people like this? I'd dive into that world 100%.
I mean, they built their own territories for all the different mythological stages. So I'm kind of like, can we just go to Persia? Build me like a small little level. Tell me it's Persia. I'll be very happy. Like, let's
I'll
go.
go there.
Like, I'll go there. Like, let's do it. So yeah, I was really sad that they only had them come to Greece. And I was like, no, but let's go to Persepolis. But it's fine. That's another game I'm sure that they could make in the future. Oh, one thing I'm really curious to know though is so especially with like having lived in Greece and like so you're familiar with a lot of the real places and what they look like.
Mm.
It's impossible. You can't walk around Athens without seeing ancient stuff everywhere, right? So, did you have a favorite accurate or inaccurate thing in AC Odyssey?
Okay, I'm going to give you two responses. So, one, my favorite one was Delphi. Now, one of the reasons I'm going to mention the second one is because when I went to the studio, I think before we even, so I went to Ubisoft in Quebec, I think maybe a month before we started shooting. They showed us a demo and they showed us all the research, the archaeological research that had been done because they'd spent maybe a year, I think, in Greece, and they'd spoken to a ton of specialists and a ton of archaeologists to make it as accurate as possible. And what they showed us, they said like this, according to specialists we've talked to, is an accurate depiction of what the Parthenon used to look like. And it was the most trippy, vibrant, colorful, oh my God, assault to the senses. Because, you always think of like temples and stuff as like marble white, like minimalistic, simple, clean. And suddenly it's like, my eyes, which apparently was exactly how it used to be. Vibrant yellow, blue, red. It looked horrible. By the way, I'm so happy that the colors are not there anymore. But I found that very interesting. They said that they had to tone down the color scheme because I think they were afraid to get the reaction that they got on that day. I was like, but yeah, I thought that was super cool, super interesting. That's how it was. And I had no idea. And I have Ubisoft to thank for that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known.
Nice. Yeah, I remember my art history professor. Essentially, I remember that day. He showed us sort of pictures with colors, and he was like, "Yeah, everything in ancient Greece was painted these garish colors that assaulted your senses." And I was like, "Wait, oh God, that's a lot." So I remember that. But it's interesting because I think I said this with Michael as well. I was like, I don't understand how like on the one sense, like they got a lot right, but also you take the most famous building from Greece and it's still wrong. Like it's still wrong in the game. You know what? I get budgeting reasons why you have to like copy and paste, but like why that building? Like that's the one that the Parthenon marbles are bronze. I'm like, they're not bronze. And then they have the shields up on the front of it. And I'm like, but those weren't there until the 4th century when Alexander came in. They were not there in the 5th century. So like, why this building?
Yeah. I mean, I think there was like some artistic liberties were taken.
Many.
And especially sometimes when it came to some of the locations, I was just like, that's not there. Okay, that's not next to. It's fine. It's okay. No, it's all right. I mean, the basic stuff is there. It's just not like a. But I do know that they're using quite a lot of material for educational purposes in schools now in Greece, which I thought was pretty cool. Hopefully the accurate stuff. But I think it's a really cool way to introduce students to history. And I do find it's more, because it depends on what kind of student you are and what helps you memorize stuff. Some people, I guess, for those who are visual types, this would be a very cool way of learning and seeing, like being able to step into history and make it a real thing. So I do applaud them for that, because so many people just go off history because they think that it's just dates and numbers and battles and locations, when it's just so much more interesting than that.
Well, I was going to say, I'm glad you brought in the classroom stuff, because I'm sure when working on a project, you're like, okay, it's going to have a certain amount of reach and it's going to be popular with, there's the audiences you kind of expect it to. And then, of course, there's the like audiences you may not be thinking about. So I'm curious, were you aware that AC Odyssey, since it came out in 2018, has become by far, statistics prove it, by far, the single most studied, written about, covered game in the entire field of classics and archaeology?
Tell me more. I had no idea. Really?
Yeah. So I was just at the biggest conference for our field in January. So the Society for Classical Studies has had new panels that have incorporated a lot of like digital humanities, gaming and stuff. And there were like 3 panels with AC Odyssey. So I remember I went to every single one of them, and I would like go and ask questions, and people were presenting like massive like stats and all this stuff of being like, this is the single most written about game in our entire field, and it's not going to stop anytime soon. So I'm kind of like, does that have any different impact, knowing that like this is probably the most popular game in the academic community, who I'm sure you're not thinking about when you're like, I'm just going to make a video game?
That is insane. Does that mean that it's popular amongst the academic community, or that it's studied, or that it's preferred by? Does that make sense? I mean, is it used as an object of study? Is, I think, my question to you. I don't know.
Yeah, because and that's the nice thing about this type of game as well is you can do so much. So, a lot of people study it looking for accuracy, which of course a lot of people are kind of sad about, but they use it then as like a tool in the classroom where they can say, or they'll put together like videos and use it at conferences to present. There was a panel, one of the curators of the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford said that they had an exhibit and they worked with the PR people at Ubisoft, and they created a 4-minute video of Cass like walking around Knossos. We had this really lively discussion on that panel about how, well, it's too violent, so they didn't want people at the museum to play the game. So instead they had to just use sort of a big cutscene thing walking through. But then they did a lot of like stats and research on, okay, so did it add to the visual experience? Like, are we looking for accuracy? Are we looking for this is just something that will visually help you? And then we can correct the inaccuracies based on like, okay, we'll mark out everything that's wrong. There's so many different ways you can use it. It goes right down to the stories. Sometimes you'll study like structure of story. There's so many different ways you can study it.
Wow.
So I think it's used both as a visual tool, as a narrative tool, as a tool to be studied both for its accuracies and inaccuracies. So any way you can study and take anything out of this game is how it's being used.
That is
Yeah.
incredible. I'd actually never really thought that it would go that it would end up like that. No, absolutely not. I mean, I think it's wonderful, actually. It's like the thing is, starting and doing this game, my experience with games was extremely limited. I didn't really know that much about them. I'd tried very unsuccessfully to play. I'm still not great. I'm better, but I'm still not great. And when the game came out, the impact it had, I could not wrap my head around it. And the fact that it does keep growing and that it's finding, I don't know, it's resonating more and more, and it's finding a wider audience. It just, I don't know, it's just, it keeps on growing, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I'm just like, whether you realize it or not, I was like realizing at this conference through talking with like seasoned academics who've been like PhDs for 20 years, they're like, there's this newfangled thing and it's video games and it's amazing. I can use it in my class. I can do this. I can do that. I even met like a linguist who was like, oh, I take the game, I chop it, put little clips of the language. And I was like, wait, what? And they're like, yeah, I show the background and like, this is a way where you can get like realistic language in an ancient environment. And I was like, oh my God.
Wow. Okay. Insane. Right. I mean, as long as they don't use Malacca, I think we'll be fine. Really not a realistic.
Don't worry, we got that covered. I think everyone prefaces it and they're like, there's a lot of Malacca in there. And they're like, that is not ancient Greek. And just ignore that. That's just for the fun for the game. And we're like, okay, cool. Putting that aside. But this is a rare opportunity. It's a game about ancient Greece. You have a lot of Greek actors on. So I'm like, how much of the real accurate, correct language were you trying to push for to get in there? Because as much as made it in, I was like, this is awesome, but I want more.
A lot. And I think it could have been more. But again, I think because it was such a massive game, and obviously they were recording in 3 or 4 different countries at the same time. By the time we got to a bit where there'd be a dialogue and maybe I'd be talking to someone who then would be using ancient Greek or Greek as a way of responding to me, they kind of say, oh, they've already recorded that and they chose to go that direction or this direction. And sometimes they do like an alt recording. So they'll get the ancient Greek or the Greek version, and then they'll say, oh, let's just do an alt have it in English just in case we want to use this later. And obviously, if they got to try it out with an audience or test audience at some point, and obviously maybe some of the feedback that they got was, oh, let's have a little bit less of this or a little bit more of that, then that would have also affected it. There's a lot of correcting, or there's a lot of names that weren't always very accurate, and that there was a lot of text that I was like, oh, let's just do this in Greek, that'd be really cool, or there's this really cool expression that maybe we could squeeze in here and there and stuff. But it also comes down to what is relatable, and maybe not everyone could relate to that, I guess, which is understandable. I get it.
Yeah, no, you got to think of the broader audience, not the. I know, as much as I'd like to think that we're the center of everything, us historians, we're not. It struck me because I think it was for one of the side quest materials they added in, but essentially you get to play like hide and seek, and then you count. Who made the decision to count in Greek? So sort of teach us how to count to 10 in Greek.
I don't remember if that was scripted or not. It may have not been. I'm not going to be able to give you a satisfactory response on this, as in I can't remember with accuracy. It does sound like something I would do, but then again, it may have been scripted as well. I don't want to take all the credit for that one. I secretly
For
do,
sure.
but I won't.
No, for sure. I'm sure that all these years later, I know you've done a ton of promotion for this game, and I know people are always asking you for your favorite line. So I'm not going to ask you what your favorite line is. Don't worry. Although I kind of am going to take that question and twist it and say, what was the favorite Greek word or line that you got to use all the time? That's not Malaka.
Not Malaka. I get it. I liked. It's not my favorite though. It's really difficult. You've taken Malaka out of the mix now, so I don't really have that much to work with.
It's great. It's a brain teaser. It's like try to get Mel to remember how much Greek was actually in that game.
How much Greek was actually in this game? I mean, I'm trying to remember in terms of greetings, because you always have here, you have drachmi or drachme, which, okay, again, not my favorite. Was there another word that I said on repeat?
Yes.
Really? There was?
Yes, you're missing one because actually it's my favorite.
Damn. Can you give me a hint?
It's one of the things you would say when you call your horse Phobos.
Ella?
Yes.
I was thinking of saying that one, but I was like, I don't remember saying that. Like, wow, goes to show my memory ain't what it used to be. Ella. Yeah, I like that one. I actually like using that in everyday life. I also like using it. It's like, okay, oh, come on. Ella. Or when I want something done very fast, I'm like, Ella.
So I was very happy to see that in there. And then for those in the audience who do not know Greek, that means come.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's like it's so simple, but like it fits kind of like what you're trying to do in the game, and so it's quick and I love it. So that's why it's my favorite, because it's kind of one of those fun mindless things you can just say and you're like, yeah, it's totally normal. I think it became my favorite because I realized, like, I asked a friend who doesn't know anything about Greek, and like we were playing, and then I think that came up, and she was like, I don't know what this means. What is this? Is it some random insert in the game? And I was like, wait, did you think it was like some random person's name or something? And she was like, yeah. She's like, I don't know what she's saying. I was like, oh, that's Greek. Cool. So simple, so lovely. But it's okay. Like you could totally say, you know what, Malaka was just actually the most fun Greek thing. It's fine. I will put it back in for you.
It was, but you know what? After a point, I think they're like, oh my God, we really like this word now. We're going to put it in everything.
Oh, no.
Even where it doesn't grammatically and syntactically fit in. So there's just me, like the language nerd, being like, actually, this doesn't work in Greek. This is wrong.
Man, you know what? If they ever made something else, I'd be like, what else can we slip? I mean, you could have slipped in some other sort of like inherently Greek thing to teach people, like if you could insert one random Greek word, it would be the lipon. I'm like, just put lipon in there. Just put it in and see if people figure out what it is.
That's a good one.
I was like, but maybe that's too Greek for people. But like it comes up all the time in Greece. So it's like it would make sense for it to be there. If you're gonna use modern Greek in the game, use that.
That's a good one. That's a good word. Lipon. Yeah, it's like a filler word as well. Starter. It's good. It's a good one. Good one.
Right? Yeah. One of my favorite. I got way too in the habit of doing that when I was living in Greece for no apparent reason other than it was really fun. Yeah, I know. It was it's a little sad. But I again, language nerd, so I get really excited about really small things like that.
I can relate. Especially when it was that golden moment when you decode it and then you're like, suddenly the matrix makes sense. Like, yes, I see. Now I can use this word. And then the first time you plug it into a conversation, it's like, oh my God, that was so natural, wasn't it? I did so good.
Yeah, well, and then you got to like figure out the cadence. And the wonderful thing about Lipon is you could say it like fast in a conversation, or you could start a sentence and go Lipon, and then like people are just like, yeah, yeah, okay, cool, keep going, and
I'm engaged.
I did it. Uh, so it's either that or I remember thinking like, let's just put re in everything. Re Malaka, like do something different. Like
Yeah, it would have been a good bouncing one as well. I was actually trying to. I think it comes from ore, but ore.
half the time I'll play the game and I'll be like, Orea. Like, I don't know what, like random Greek words will come to mind. It's like it puts me in that sort of Greek mood. So I use the game for like language stuff all the time. Like it's wild the things you can use this game for, man.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. I mean, if there was, actually, it's a great opportunity to use games for language learning because you get to see if you can't travel to a country or the country's language you would like to speak. It's a great opportunity because you spend so much time playing a game and you get to see actual situations and actual application of words and language. And you get to connect it with a movement or an expression or a gesture. And then suddenly that visual sticks in your brain a lot better than if you just read it in a book or, heard it on Duolingo. God bless Duolingo, but it drives me crazy sometimes, So it's, I don't know, it gets into these glitches where it just picks a person and a language, and then it just sticks with one word. And that word will be the characteristic word that you will learn for the entirety of your studies for this specific language on Duolingo. And it haunts me. Why Duolingo algorithm? Why do you do this to me? I don't want to, because I'm learning Turkish, and it's obsessed with owls in Turkish. In Italian, it's obsessed with penguins. But why? I don't get it. Anyway, never mind.
It's okay. You know what? I just because I need to practice it, because I grew up fluent in French, but I don't get to practice very often, so I'll use it. It's obsessed with dogs. It's always le chien something, and you're like, stop. I hate this. That, and then I find that it's like wrong half the time. So like I'll put in like a perfectly valid sentence, right? And it'll tell me I'm wrong because you're like, they wanted a different word. And you're like, but this is fine. So
this is fine.
Yeah.
This will do. And then it accepts as correct some things that you like there's a massive typo there. And it's just at the point where you have 0 hearts left or 1 heart left, and you're like, drives me mad. Drives me absolutely
I know,
mad.
you get so angry.
Especially when there's nothing wrong and you have accepted blatant and infuriating typos before, and suddenly I'm just typing the same thing. No, go back to square one. That was wrong.
Yeah. Oh man. The travails of using language learning tools, man. But yes, the game is one I use, and I know other people have started to use or wanted to use. So I do hope we see more barrier breaking things. I have an Egyptologist colleague friend who tries to use origins kind of the same way, but it's harder because they're speaking Greek in it too, and I guess time period wise would totally make Egypt like yes, but also we know what Coptic sounds like. So his biggest complaint for that one, because Egyptologists use origins all the time as well, but they're like, man, you could have put Coptic in here. So
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay, well, so games aren't perfect, but they are good vehicles for when you need to use them for things like this. So I'm going to move us slowly, sadly, out of our ACO talk. So I only have one last one for you, kind of on the subject. You did a lot of mocap for this, and I am a huge mocap fan. I've always been fascinated by it. And so I'm curious, as someone who's done it, like, do you think, how does it change, or what's it like being able to use that to sort of set yourself and be in like a historical place versus having props or being on a set where you can like see and sort of touch and stuff? Because I know one's mostly imagination, but when they come out, they look very, very different.
Obviously, as an actor, when you get to actually use props or be on a set that looks the way that it's going to look as an end result, there is that side of you that geeks out, says, oh my god, I'm actually holding a sword. It's so amazing. That part of yourself is satisfied, because then you not only get to live it, but you get to see it. So as a person that loves watching films and loves diving into the world, like the majority of that is being able to see the visual. So when you're acting and you get to be at the same time, then that's like the perfect combo. However, I will say that mocap that has props, but they're not the real thing. So I have foam props or blunted out instruments, et cetera, and it's not set in a castle or a dungeon or whatever. Instead, like a very neon lit studio. What that does, however, is in a very bizarre way, it's extremely liberating because it's like a blank canvas, if that makes sense. It ends up, I find, allowing you to flex imaginative muscles more because there is zero limitation. Whereas if you're in a world and you see the world, you see the physical limits. You see, this is the law of this world begins here and ends here. Like I can pick this up and I can only put it here. Whereas if you are in a completely imaginary world, so it's like a complete blank white page, then you can just do anything. And I find that more interesting. Find the first version, so being in the world, I find it very satisfying, and it kind of satisfied the kid in me that always liked to see stuff in the movies and kind of go, oh, you know, one day I'd love to be in that world. So that part of the child in me is satisfied. But the anything goes imaginative child is infinitely more satisfied by being in a mocap floor.
Pretty fair. Pretty fair. I'd like to hold a sword. I'm sometimes, you know, the like pool noodle just doesn't do it, man.
I mean, that's fair, but you know, again, you have the limitations with that. Unless you're an expert swordsman, you're never going to be able to just whack someone with all your strength because it's made out of foam, you know? So you're never going to get that out of your system when it's a real sword because there's the physical limitations of it. I might actually decapitate you. Tiny little detail. So in a way, you don't get to live it as much, you know?
That's true. It's fine. You know, I know it's wrong, but I had this great image in my head. I was like, well, if I could go and do like a leap of faith, you know, I'm like, give me like the gymnastics pool of foam, right? And then just like let me go up a ladder and then just let me like physically just like fling myself into the foamy pool of foamy blocks. And that would be really fun. You know, just things like that.
Put it on like a weird birthday wish list. You never know.
Yeah, let me just run down to the local, you know, mocap studio somewhere here in LA. Be like, let me just launch myself off into a pit of
Like,
foamy
do you guys
things.
mind? Still, it'll take me like 10 minutes tops.
Right? Like not even like just give me 5 minutes. One jump, one jump. So that would be really fun. Thank you for bearing with me through all the in the weeds kind of ACO stuff.
It's been great.
So sadly, I gotta get us to the end.
Has poem time come?
But yes, it is poem time. And so now, dear listeners, dear audience members, I have a very special surprise. And we will have Cassandra from Assassin's Creed Odyssey here with us today reading Ozymandias. So this is going to be fun.
Wow. Okay. I just opened this. Okay. I just go for it. Is that the point? Yeah. It's like a cold read.
It's a cold read. Go for it. And I will ask you the actual questions after.
I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal, these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away."
That is my favorite poem of all time, read by one of my favorite video game characters of all time. So right now, I'm like, seventh heaven. Nothing in my life is going to be better than that. So
I'm hoping I could have done a better version of it. So I was just like, reading words as they come into vision.
It's perfect. I was just like, oh my God, Cass is reading me my poem.
Well, I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad you enjoyed it. That's the only thing that matters.
Okay, so basically, this poem is my favorite of all time. I've loved it since I read it in high school. And have you ever seen this poem before? And if you have, great. If you haven't, even better.
It rang a bell, but I'm not gonna. I think I may have read it once a very long time ago.
Even better. Cool. Okay. So since you don't have it clear in your mind, like, oh, yes, I know exactly this poem, this makes it even better. So a lot of people say that this is one of the best poems they've ever read. People cite kind of the artistry, some people cite the subject matter. And so now I'm curious to think what do you think of this poem? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you agree that it is sort of gorgeously made? What do you think this poem is trying to tell us?
It is beautiful. It mocks and reveres at the same time, I think, the importance that we bestow on the now, because the King of Kings was once the King of Kings and the most important. But obviously with time, everything just melts away and everything loses its significance or doesn't. But I think it kind of mocks and reveres. I think I'm going to stick with that. It mocks and reveres the importance that we bestow on the now and time and strength and command and magnitude. Has many layers. I think more I'll read it, the more will be revealed. But this is my first take on it. It's great. It's really nice.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot to unpack for a 14-line sonnet. I think almost every single person I've ever spoken to who's read it is like, wow, man, I don't think I could actually describe everything just by reading it once. And
So many
it's true.
layers. Yeah. So you have the traveler from the antique land, the writer meets someone else. So it's like there's many layers to the people involved in this story, because you have the sculptor, you have the sculpture, you have the head, you have the legs, you have the traveler, you have the person observing all this. So there's already so many people involved or so many points of view to see it from. And it's really nice. Thank you for sharing that, actually. I'll read it again and again and again until more things pop.
Perfect. Well, that lends well to having you back on the show with a greater appreciation and a different interpretation.
So this is me, the nerd, instantly going, "What is the etymology of Ozymandias?" I have to Google this now.
I was like, okay, I can also tell you because I do have the spiel in my head. I have the short version. So it is actually the Greek version of Ramesses II throne name, Usur-Maatre or Usur-Maatra.
I like it. Okay.
Because that's the King of Kings. So essentially, Percy Shelley wrote this when in 1818 there was a broken statue of Ramesses II that was found in Egypt, and it was being shipped to the British Museum. And so he was like wanting to get very poetic about this and sort of craft something. And so he wrote this poem about this broken statue that they found and they were going to come and bring back to the UK. And like, this is what he came out with. And everyone was like, oh my God. And so now I'm like, oh my gosh. So you put it in like the historical context. And so like, for me, the thing that I think I grabbed onto when I first read this in like high school was like, it's a very political poem. It's Shelley making a statement. It's also kind of like a revolutionary poem in a way. Like there's so many layered themes. It talks about, monumentality and legacy and, kind of, was this king great because he's king of kings, but also it's a broken statue who, it wouldn't be here. He thought his civilization would be around forever, and now it's under sand. Like, what does that tell you?
Yeah.
He couldn't do it alone. Yeah, so there's a lot there.
He could have been very important, because like he could have actually been King of Kings and extremely important, but it's like, that's what I'm saying. It's like the how temporary things actually are. Like, what is he's just ended up being this decapitated figure of just a face in the sand with a sneer. The sneer is the arrogance as well. It's like, I am the King of Kings, I'm this, and where are you now? You're face down in the sand, being scooped up and transported to another place, and the only thing that remains is just the plaque that says, my name is da 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 da. And like, who cares? No one cares.
No, I don't, right? So it's like, it's so
look on my works, ye mighty in despair. And you're like, really? Despair is like, okay, you're lying face down in the sand, dude.
Right?
I'm not the one who's despairing here.
Right. So no, it's so layered. And this is my favorite thing because this is like the last question I ask every single guest. And it's like, so if we think about all these themes, these political themes, monumentality, legacy, what this means visually, if we think about our world right now, do we have a modern version of Ozymandias? Do we have something we think is like so great and amazing? We think it'll last forever, but like, realistically, like 200 years from now, are people going to agree with us? Are they going to look back and be like, they were crazy?
I'm very tempted to go with a very obvious choice. I'm very tempted to kind of go for the cell phone. I don't think that in 200 years from now, I think we'll be using something very different. And I think that we'll be revering it. People will be like, what the hell were people doing back then? Like, why? I don't get it. Or maybe it's my wishful thinking that that's going to be the case. I just could be money, could be actual currency. And 200 years from now, people will be like, why were they fighting for this thing that was, why did everybody want this thing? It's like, I don't understand. Maybe again, it's wishful thinking. I don't know.
It's fine. Well, we can take one, we could take both. There's no right or wrong answer. I love them both. I mean, we're already kind of trending in that way. I mean, living in Greece where cash is still king, you're like, whoa, as opposed to, being in the States where you can use both. And then I like went to visit a friend of mine in Sweden and they were like, we don't take cash anywhere. We're essentially phasing it out. So you have to use cards for everything. And I was like, what? I was like, but I can't wait. What? And then imagine like going right back to Greece. I was like, oh wait, now I need bundles of cash again. So
Yeah.
it's weird.
Yeah, it is. I mean, then I went to Turkey, which almost you exclusively need cash. In Greece, it's now kind of becoming like a half and half thing. But Turkey, I was so not used to having cash. And then suddenly it's like, okay, hang on. Running like an idiot to find an ATM.
Same thing in Egypt. Like I went to visit and I was like, wait, I need to take out like 3,000 pounds at a time. What is this? Like it was really scary. So I was like,
Crazy. Yeah.
I don't like walking around with
I'm not
this much
comfortable
money.
having this much money.
Yeah, I was like, oh God, this is awkward. So you know what? I love the idea of money. I'm gonna pick up and say money is the money answer. But cell phones are good too. I mean, as technology changes, I think for sure they could be phased out. And I don't know, we could all have like the Star Wars-esque sort of projection, something,
I mean,
you know.
we're very close to that. Anyway,
We're very close to
we're
that.
super close. We're getting there.
We are. That's true. That's true. So I'm going to go with money. So I kind of lied. There is actually one last question. It's really easy though. Where can people find you online if they want to follow your work and other projects that you are doing?
I have an Instagram page, which I'm notoriously crap at using or updating, but it is there. And it might take me like a couple of months to update with the latest things, but I do get there eventually. It's at Melissanthi Mahut. Yeah, I do. I think have Twitter, which again I use even less than I use my Instagram account. So I wouldn't recommend you try and find me there, although you can if you want to. I don't even remember what my handle is there. I'm trying to scroll less, I think. So that is kind of why I'm not that great with updating and uploading stuff. So I'm trying to only use it for absolutely necessary things. But when I do get projects and it gets to the point where I can talk about them, then I do post quite a bit of content on social media.
Cool. Well, I will make sure at least to link your Instagram page in the show notes so people can go and they can find you and follow you
Thank you.
and track all the cool things. And I know that I've either referenced or thought about several YouTube things that show kind of behind the scenes of the game. And if I can remember, I will find them and link them as well, because I'm sure that you've talked all about the making of AC Odyssey online as well. So yeah, thanks, man, for coming and chatting today.
Thank
It's been
you.
super fun.
It has been amazing. Thank you very much for having me. It's been great chatting with you. Extremely educational as well. Learned so many new things.
I'm glad. I'm glad. Well, we'll just have to have you back on for another poem reading and something else.
Amazing. And also could go crazy at some point. We could just kind of give me like a recipe to read in Cassandra voice, but make it a really ridiculous one next time or something.
Oh, I've got you covered. I've got you.
I think that'd be fun. We kick things off and then just kind of take it into more the more serious realm of poetry. But
Oh,
yeah.
yes, of course. Of course.
Trireme Transit is now departing ancient office hours. Next stop is Present Ponderings.